Walt McKenna saw the quilt before he saw his daughter. It was hanging from a metal rack in the church fellowship hall, clipped between a crocheted baby blanket and a plastic bag full of Christmas bows. For one strange second, his mind refused to name it. Then he saw the blue stars, Margaret's blue stars, the quilt his wife had folded across their bed every December. The quilt she had touched with both hands the week before hospice, whispering, "Don't let this get lost." A yellow sticker was pinned to the lower corner. $15. Walt stood still while people moved around him with paper cups of coffee and paper plates of banana bread. Someone laughed near the bake sale table, and the sound felt wrong in his ears. He reached for the quilt carefully, like Margaret might still feel it. "Dad!" Denise's voice came from behind him, sharp and low. Walt turned. His daughter was walking toward him with a donation clipboard tucked under one arm and a smile that looked like it had been put on for other people. "What is this doing here?" Walt asked. Denise glanced at the quilt, then at the women sorting casserole dishes 2 tables away. "It's a fundraiser," she said. "I told you I was bringing a few things." "A few things?" Walt looked back at the quilt. "That was your mother's." Denise stepped closer. "It was in the cedar chest with a dozen other blankets." "It wasn't a blanket." Her mouth tightened. "Dad, please!" Walt touched the yellow sticker with one finger. The pin had gone through the corner fabric and left a small pull in the thread. "You priced it?" "I donated it," Denise said. "They priced it. For $15. It's old, Dad." The words hit harder than he expected. Old. As if that explained everything. A woman in a green church vest came up beside them, holding a small receipt slip. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, smiling politely. "That quilt already sold." The buyer just stepped over to get her purse. Walt looked at the receipt in her hand. Denise's face changed before she caught it. Walt reached up and unclipped one corner of the quilt anyway. Denise caught his wrist. Not hard, but firmly enough that 2 people nearby turned to look. "Dad," she whispered, "don't embarrass me here." Walt stared at her hand on his wrist. Then, from the far side of the rack, an older woman's voice said, "Wait a minute." The older woman stepped around the rack with a pair of reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She was small, silver-haired, and careful with her hands in the way quilters were careful. Walt had seen Margaret touch fabric like that. "Excuse me," the woman said, looking at Denise first, then Walt. "May I see the back of it before anyone carries it off?" Denise forced a short laugh. "It's already sold, Evelyn, so it can wait 30 seconds. The name came back to Walt slowly. Evelyn Carter. Margaret had once pointed her out at the county fair and said, "That woman can read stitches like handwriting." Evelyn lifted the lower corner of the quilt, the same corner wounded by the price tag. Walt pulled his hand free from Denise's grip. "Dad," Denise said under her breath, "this is not the place. It became the place when you hung it on a rack." The woman in the green vest shifted uncomfortably, receipt still in hand. 2 church ladies pretended to straighten mugs while listening. Evelyn ignored all of them. She turned the quilt just enough to see the backing, then stopped. Her finger followed a line of tiny stitches near one blue star, slow and precise. "That's odd," she said. Denise's eyes flicked to the seam. "It's handmade." "Handmade things are odd." "No," Evelyn said. "Handmade things have rhythm. This breaks it." Walt looked where she pointed, but all he saw was thread and faded cotton. Evelyn leaned closer. "Margaret's stitches were even. These are hers too, but they're different. Smaller, tighter, like she was hiding the finish." Denise folded her arms. "Or like she repaired an old quilt. Maybe." That single word made Walt's chest tighten. Evelyn looked at him. "Did your wife ever mention adding anything to the back?" Walt opened his mouth, then closed it. Margaret had said many things near the end, some clear, some half-finished. One sentence came back sharp enough to hurt. "Don't let this get lost." "No," he said. Not like that. Denise reached for the quilt. Then there's nothing to discuss. The buyer paid for it. Evelyn did not let go. Her thumb pressed gently along the seam, and the fabric lifted a little, just enough to show that the backing was not flat. She looked at Walt, not Denise. This was not sewn by accident. Evelyn held the quilt as if it might answer if everyone got quiet enough. The fellowship hall did not get quiet. Coffee cups clicked. A child laughed near the bake sale table, and someone called out the price of a punch bowl. But around the quilt, the air had changed. Walt watched Evelyn's finger trace the strange seam again. It ran along the backing in a narrow rectangle. So neat he wondered how he had never noticed it. "Is it damaged?" he asked. "No." Evelyn tilted the fabric toward the light. "That's what bothers me." Denise gave a small, impatient breath. "A hidden flaw in an old quilt doesn't make it some treasure." Evelyn glanced at her. "I didn't say treasure." The word hung there anyway. The woman in the green vest looked toward the hallway. "The buyer will be back any second." Walt's pulse beat against his collar. "Can you tell what it is?" "I can tell what it isn't," Evelyn said. "It isn't a tear. It isn't a patch. And it isn't careless." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a tiny pair of sewing scissors, the kind Margaret used to keep in a tomato-shaped pincushion. Denise stepped forward. "You are not cutting into my mother's quilt." Walt turned to her. "You sold it 5 minutes ago." Denise's face tightened, but she said nothing. Evelyn shook her head. "I won't cut anything. If I'm right, it was made to open." She looked at Walt. "May I?" It was such a small question, but Walt felt the weight of it. Margaret had trusted him with this quilt, and somehow he had let it end up on a church rack with a price tag through its corner. "Yes," he said, carefully. Evelyn slid one fingernail under a hidden fold, then eased the backing apart with the patience of someone opening an old envelope. A narrow pocket appeared beneath the seam. Walt heard Denise inhale. The church noise faded for him then. Not gone, exactly, just far away. Evelyn slipped 2 fingers inside the pocket and stopped. "There's something in here." Walt took half a step closer. Evelyn drew out a small, folded piece of fabric, no bigger than a playing card, creased flat from years of hiding. She held it in her palm without opening it. Denise whispered, "What is that?" Evelyn did not unfold the fabric right away. She looked at Walt first, waiting for permission, and that small courtesy nearly broke something in him. Walt nodded once. Evelyn opened the folded cloth with 2 careful fingers. It was not paper. It was a cream-colored fabric label, the kind Margaret used to sew onto jars, baskets, and Christmas stockings when she wanted something remembered. There were 4 lines written in faded blue ink. Evelyn held it closer to the light. "Do you want me to read it?" she asked. Walt's throat felt too tight, so he only nodded again. Evelyn read softly. "Blue Star Quilt, for Lily when she is old enough to ask." Denise made a sound so small Walt almost missed it. Evelyn continued. "First square, Denise's dress, 1984. Last square, Lily's blanket, 2007. Her eyes moved to the final line. Walt saved every piece. For a moment, nobody spoke. The woman in the green vest lowered the receipt in her hand. Even the 2 women by the mug table stopped pretending not to listen. Walt stared at the label. His name in Margaret's hand. Not a note. Not an explanation. Just a record, stitched into fabric and hidden where only someone careful would ever find it. Denise reached for the label, then pulled her hand back before touching it. "That doesn't make sense," she said. Lily's name had done something to her face. But when Walt repeated, "Denise's dress," she turned away like she had not heard him. Evelyn folded the label back halfway, careful not to crease it wrong. This was written before it was sealed inside. The stitching around the pocket is old. Denise's voice hardened. "You can't know that from looking." "I can't know everything," Evelyn said. "But I know when a pocket was made on purpose." Walt looked down at the blue stars. Suddenly, every square seemed less like decoration and more like a locked door. "Why would she hide this?" he asked. Denise answered too quickly. "Because Mom hid things. She always did." But Walt saw her eyes go to the first blue square near the corner, then away again. And for the first time, he wondered if Denise had known more about this quilt than she was willing to say. The buyer came back holding a brown leather purse against her side. She was older than Denise, younger than Walt, with kind eyes that made the moment harder instead of easier. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at the quilt in Evelyn's hands. "Is there a problem?" Denise answered first. "No problem. Just a little confusion." Walt looked at the fabric label resting in Evelyn's palm. Confusion was not the word. The buyer glanced at the quilt. "It reminded me of one my mother had. I already paid for it." Walt reached into his back pocket slowly and pulled out his wallet. Denise saw what he was doing. "Dad, don't!" He ignored her and looked at the woman. "Would you let me buy it back?" The woman hesitated. "I don't want to get in the middle of family business." "You already are," Denise muttered. Walt took out a $20 bill, then another. His fingers shook just enough that he hated it. "My wife made this. I didn't know it was here." The woman's face softened. "Then take it." "No," Walt said. "You paid fair. I'll pay fair." Denise gave a bitter little laugh. "Now it's worth $40? Walt turned to her, still holding the money. "It was never worth 15. That quieted her. The buyer accepted $120 and pushed the other back into his hand. "Give the extra to the fundraiser," she said. "But take your quilt home." Walt nodded once, unable to say thank you without his voice breaking. Evelyn slid the fabric label back inside the hidden pocket but did not close it completely. "Keep it flat," she told him, "and don't let anyone press that seam until you know what you're looking at." Denise folded her arms. "You're all acting like Mom left a treasure map." Walt lifted the quilt from the rack himself. The $15 tag still hung from the corner, bright and ugly against Margaret's blue stars. "No," he said. "I'm acting like she left a question." Denise looked away. In the parking lot, Lily stood beside Walt's truck, staring at the quilt across his arms. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "I think I've seen that blue star fabric before." Walt looked at her. Lily swallowed. "There's a baby picture at your house. Grandma used to say it was my favorite blanket." Walt drove home with the quilt folded across Lily's lap. Denise followed in her own car, close enough that Walt could see her headlights every time he checked the mirror. Nobody spoke when they entered the house. The cedar chest sat at the foot of Walt's bed, exactly where Margaret had kept it for 38 years. The brass latch had darkened with age, and the top still held the faint ring from Margaret's water glass. Denise stopped in the doorway. "We do not need to dig through every box Mom ever packed." Walt knelt beside the chest. "I'm not digging." He lifted the lid. The smell came out first. Lavender sachets, old cotton, and the paper scent of photographs that had waited too long in the dark. Lily set the quilt carefully on the bed. The $15 tag still hung from the corner, and she kept glancing at it like it might fall off by itself. Walt pulled out a stack of envelopes tied with faded ribbon. Denise stood with her arms crossed. "This is exactly what I meant. One little label, and suddenly we're putting Mom on trial." "No," Walt said, opening the first envelope. "We're asking what she wanted us to see." Lily moved beside him. "Grandma had a photo of me wrapped in a blue blanket. I remember because she used to tap the picture and say, 'That one knew how to sleep.'" Despite herself, Denise almost smiled. It disappeared quickly. Walt handed Lily one envelope, then took another for himself. They searched through birthdays, Christmas mornings, a hospital lobby, Margaret holding a cake with one crooked candle. Every photo was a door that opened and closed too fast. Then Lily stopped. "Grandpa." She held up a photograph with both hands. In the picture, she was a baby in Margaret's arms, wrapped in a blue blanket patterned with small stars. Walt looked from the photo to the quilt. Lily carried it to the bed and laid it beside the last square. The fabric matched. Not close, not similar, matched. Denise took one step forward, then stopped as if the floor had warned her. Lily whispered, "So that part was true." Walt touched the edge of the quilt, careful not to disturb the hidden pocket. "If the last square was Lily's blanket," he said, looking toward Denise, "then what was the first?" Denise's face went still. Walt kept the baby photo beside the quilt and studied the blue star square until his eyes watered. Margaret had not guessed. She had recorded. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, one hand near the quilt but not touching it. "Grandma really saved my blanket?" Walt nodded. "She saved more than that." Denise gave a quiet, bitter breath from the doorway. "Mom saved everything." Walt looked up at her. No, she chose what to save. That landed differently. Denise's arms tightened across her chest, but she did not leave. Lily picked up the fabric label again and read the middle line under her breath. First square, Denise's dress, 1984. The year pulled Walt backward. 1984. Denise was 4, maybe 5. Margaret had spent 2 nights at the kitchen table sewing a little blue dress because store-bought ones cost too much that spring. Walt turned to the cedar chest. "What are you doing?" Denise asked. "Looking for the first square. We already found enough." "We found Lily's part," Walt said. "Not yours." Denise flinched at that word. Lily noticed it too. Walt lifted out more envelopes, slower now. Margaret had labeled some by holiday, some by year, some with names only she would have understood. There was no 1984 on top. Lily helped quietly, stacking envelopes in careful piles on the bedspread. The quilt stayed between them like a witness no one could dismiss. Denise stepped closer despite herself. Her eyes moved over the faded cotton, then stopped on a small square near the corner. It was pale blue with tiny white flowers. Her face changed for half a second. Walt saw it? "You recognize that one?" "No," Denise said too quickly. Lily looked from her mother to the quilt. "Mom?" Denise shook her head. "I was little. I don't remember every dress I wore." Walt did not argue. He kept searching until his hand touched a thinner envelope tucked under a stack of Christmas cards. Margaret's handwriting crossed the front in blue pen. Denise, early years. Walt held it still. Inside, the photographs felt heavier than paper should. And beneath the first picture, written in Margaret's small script, was one date. 1984. Walt did not open the envelope right away. Denise stared at Margaret's handwriting on the front like it had accused her from across the room. "Dad," she said, quieter now. "Please don't." Lily looked at her mother. "Why not?" Denise's jaw tightened. "Because not everything needs to be turned into proof." Walt held the envelope in both hands. He had spent years letting Denise set the pace of grief because he thought it kept the family together. But the quilt lay on the bed with the hidden pocket still slightly open, and for once, silence felt like another way of losing Margaret. He opened the flap. The first photo showed Denise as a little girl standing in the old kitchen, one hand gripping the table leg, the other holding a paper crown from preschool. She wore a pale blue dress with tiny white flowers. Lily leaned closer, but Walt kept the photo in his hand, not ready to lay it beside the quilt yet. Denise turned away. "I don't remember that dress." "You don't have to remember it for it to have happened," Walt said. That made her look back. He flipped the photo gently. On the back, Margaret had written 3 words beneath the date. "First dress I made." Denise swallowed. For the first time since church, she reached toward the quilt, then stopped before touching the pale blue square near the corner. Walt saw her hand curl closed. "She used to tell me Grandma made things for Lily," Denise said. "Blankets, pillows, little bags, everything soft." Lily's face changed. "Mom." Denise shook her head once, warning her not to make it gentle. Walt looked from the photo to the quilt, then back to Denise. He was beginning to understand that the quilt had not been sold because it was worthless. It had been sold because it had weight. Denise pointed at the photo without touching it. If that's the dress, fine. You found what you wanted. No, Walt said. I found what your mother wanted us to ask. Denise's eyes flashed. And what's that? Walt looked down at the first square on the quilt. Why would Margaret hide Denise at the beginning of a quilt Denise believed had left her out? Walt laid the photo on the bed beside the quilt. He did it slowly, giving Denise time to stop him. She did not. The pale blue dress in the picture sat inches from the pale blue square near the quilt's corner. Tiny white flowers ran across both, faded in the same uneven places, like time had touched them with the same hand. Lily leaned over first. "That's it," she whispered. Denise stood very still. Walt did not say anything. He only moved the photo closer until the pattern almost lined up with the square. The room seemed to shrink around the bed. Denise looked at the photo, then at the quilt, then at the fabric label still tucked halfway inside the hidden pocket. "She cut up my dress," Denise said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were not. Walt nodded. "After you outgrew it?" Denise gave a hard little laugh that had no humor in it. "Of course. Mom kept the piece, not the dress." Lily looked confused. "But that means she kept part of you." Denise's mouth opened, then closed. Walt picked up the photo and turned it over again. Margaret's handwriting stared back at him. "First dress I made." He handed it to Denise. She took it this time. Her thumb moved over the words, not touching the ink but hovering close, like she was afraid it might disappear. "I thought she made this quilt after Lily was born," Denise said. "She finished it after Lily was born," Walt said. "That's different." Denise looked down at the first square. Lily moved beside her, careful and quiet. "Mom, Grandma didn't start with me." Denise's eyes filled, but she blinked it away fast. "She never told me," she said. Walt heard the old hurt inside those 4 words. Not anger now. Something younger. He looked at the quilt and saw what Margaret had hidden in plain sight. Not a favorite child, not a replacement, but a line from one generation to the next. Lily reached toward the first square, then stopped short of touching it. "Can I?" she asked Denise. Denise stared at the fabric for a long moment. Then she nodded. And when Lily placed her hand on the square, Denise pulled in a breath like it hurt. Walt placed the photo beside the quilt. He did it carefully, like the bed had become a table in a church, and the truth needed room to breathe. The pale blue dress in the picture sat inches from the pale blue square near the quilt's corner. Tiny white flowers ran across both, faded in the same uneven places. Lily saw it first. "That's the same fabric," she whispered. Denise did not answer. Her eyes moved from the photo to the square, then to the hidden pocket where Margaret's label still showed at the edge. Walt turned the photo over again. Margaret's handwriting waited on the back. "First dress I made." He held it out to Denise. For a moment, Walt thought she would refuse it. Then she took the photo with both hands. Her thumb hovered near the writing, careful not to smear ink that had dried decades ago. "She cut up my dress," Denise said. Walt nodded. "After you outgrew it." Denise gave a small laugh, but it broke before it became sound. "Mom kept a piece of it?" Lily looked from her mother to the quilt. "She kept the first piece that landed harder than anything Walt could have said." Denise sank onto the edge of the bed, still holding the photo. "I thought she made the quilt after Lily was born," she said. "She finished it after Lily was born," Walt said. "She started saving pieces long before that." Denise looked at the first square again. For the first time, she reached out and touched it. Not the whole quilt, just that one square. Her fingers barely pressed the fabric, but Walt saw her face change like something inside her had shifted, and she did not trust it yet. Lily moved closer. "Mom, Grandma didn't start with me." Denise looked at her daughter then, and the anger in her face had nowhere to hide. "She never told me," Denise said. Walt heard what she really meant. "She never told me I mattered like that." The room went quiet around the quilt. Lily looked down at the blue square beneath Denise's hand and asked softly, "Then why did you want it gone?" Denise did not pull away, but she did not answer. Lily's question stayed in the room longer than her voice did. Denise kept her fingers on the pale blue square, but her hand had gone still. The photo of her little dress rested in her lap. Margaret's handwriting turned upward. Walt waited. For most of his life, waiting had been his way of loving people who did not know how to speak. But this time, he did not look away. Denise finally said, "Because every time I saw it, I saw her with Lily." Lily's face tightened. "With me?" Denise nodded once, eyes still on the quilt. "She was different with you. Softer. Patient. She would sit for an hour letting you tangle thread around her fingers." Walt remembered that. Margaret laughing in the rocker, Lily on the floor, blue scraps everywhere. Denise touched the square again, harder now. "When I was little, she was tired. Always tired. Work, bills, dinner, laundry. If I cried, she told me to help. If Lily cried, she made a blanket. Lily looked down. Walt wanted to defend Margaret. The words rose automatically, loyal and sharp, but he swallowed them. Denise gave a thin smile. "So yes, I hated that quilt, not because it was old, because it looked like proof." "Proof of what?" Lily asked. Denise looked at her daughter then. "That she had saved all her gentleness for you." The room went quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. Not hidden. Opened. Lily picked up the fabric label from the edge of the pocket and read the line with her mother's name without saying it aloud. Then she placed it beside the dress photo. "Mom," she said, "if Grandma started with your dress, maybe she wasn't choosing me instead of you." Denise did not move. Lily reached for the quilt, found the blue star square from her baby blanket, then touched the pale square from Denise's dress. "Maybe she was trying to give me a piece of you." Denise closed her eyes. Walt saw her hand loosen on the photo. For the first time since the church, the yellow $15 tag looked smaller than the wound it had made. Denise opened her eyes and looked at the tag still pinned to the corner. Then she reached toward it. Denise's hand stopped just above the yellow tag. For a second, Walt thought she might pull back the way she had pulled back from everything else that hurt too much to touch. But she pinched the edge of the sticker between two fingers. The tag did not come off easily. The pin had gone through Margaret's fabric, and the sticker had caught on a loose thread near one blue star. Denise's mouth tightened as she worked it free, slower now, careful in a way Walt had not seen all day. Nobody rushed her. Lily sat beside her, one hand still resting between the square from her baby blanket and the square from Denise's dress. Walt stood at the foot of the bed, holding the old photo envelope, feeling the strange weight of not needing to prove anything more. The evidence was all there. Margaret's label, Lily's blanket, Denise's dress, Walt's name written in blue ink because he had saved the pieces when everyone else thought he was only keeping scraps. Denise finally slipped the pin loose. The yellow tag came away in her hand. Underneath it, the quilt had a tiny hole. Denise stared at it. "Oh," she whispered. It was such a small sound that Walt almost missed it. Lily leaned closer. "It's okay." Denise shook her head. "No, it isn't." Walt expected anger to come back then, or shame, or some sharp sentence meant to cover both. Instead, Denise pressed the tag flat against her palm and looked at the place where it had been. "I priced it like fabric," she said, "because I didn't want to admit what it was." Walt did not answer. He wanted to say Margaret would have understood. He wanted to say grief makes fools of people. He wanted to say $15 could not touch what that quilt carried. But the room did not need his speech. Denise looked at the fabric label again. Her eyes caught on the last line. Walt saved every piece. She looked up at him then. "You knew?" she asked. "I knew your mother saved cloth," Walt said. "I didn't know she saved it like this. But you kept it." "Yes, even when I said the cedar chest was full of junk." Walt nodded once. Denise looked down. For the first time, she did not defend herself. Lily picked up the photo of Denise in the blue dress and placed it beside the quilt again. "Grandma started with you, Mom." Denise touched the photo with one finger. Then she looked at Lily, and her voice changed. "I thought that quilt meant I came second." Lily's eyes filled. "Maybe it meant I came from you. That did it." Denise bent forward, not dramatically, not loudly. Just enough that her shoulders shook once before she caught herself. Walt looked away to give her the dignity of not being watched too closely. When he looked back, Denise was holding the removed tag in one hand and touching the first square with the other. "I almost sold the only thing that proved it," she said. Lily whispered, "Proved what?" Denise looked at Walt, then at the quilt. "That Mom remembered me before I remembered being hurt." She laid the yellow tag on the bed beside the photos, separate from the quilt now. The corner fabric stayed wounded, one tiny pinhole left behind. Denise looked at it for a long time. Then she asked, "Dad, do you still have Mom's sewing things?" Walt found Margaret's sewing basket in the side table where it had always been. For a moment, his hand rested on the lid. The basket was wicker, worn smooth where Margaret's fingers had lifted it 1,000 times. Denise stood beside the bed with the quilt in front of her, the yellow tag lying off to the side like something that no longer belonged in the room. "You don't have to fix it tonight," Walt said. Denise shook her head. "I'm not fixing it." She looked at the tiny pinhole in the quilt. "I'm starting." Walt opened the basket and set it beside her. Thread, needles, a thimble, and a small pair of scissors sat inside, exactly as Margaret had left them. Lily picked up the quilt's corner and held it steady. Denise chose blue thread, then hesitated. "Is this the right one?" Walt leaned closer. "Your mother would have picked that one." Denise gave a small breath that almost became a laugh. "She would have told me I was holding the needle wrong." She probably would have. That made Lily smile through wet eyes. Denise threaded the needle slowly. Her hands were not as sure as Margaret's had been, but she took her time, and nobody corrected her. The first stitch went in crooked. Denise looked at it and winced. Walt said, "Leave it." She looked up at him. "Why?" "Because it's ours now, too." Denise lowered her eyes, and this time she did not hide the tears. Lily moved closer until her shoulder touched her mother's. Walt picked up the fabric label and slipped it gently back into the hidden pocket, leaving the edge visible. Not hidden anymore. Not completely. Then he lifted the quilt and placed it in Lily's hands. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this when you were old enough to ask," he said. Lily held it carefully, as if she had been handed something alive. "I'm asking now," she whispered. Denise touched the first square, the one from her childhood dress. "Then you should know where it starts." She did not apologize with a speech. She did not ask Walt to pretend the day had not happened. She simply guided Lily's hand to the pale blue fabric. "That was mine," Denise said. "Before I knew how much I needed it." Walt sat on the edge of the bed and watched them. The house was quiet now, but not empty. The quilt lay across 3 laps: Walt's, Denise's, and Lily's. Margaret's blue stars stretched between them. The hidden pocket open. The pinhole mended with one imperfect stitch.